Huzzah! Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Our Declaration of Independence video lecture, the Declaration of Independence in under 10 minutes. We're going to take a look at the Declaration of Independence itself, and then we're also going to, what might even be more important, we're going to take a look at the things leading up to the Declaration of Independence. So we're going to start way back. We've been studying the colonies, and we've talked about how the colonies, they have their own self-government. They have their own colonial assemblies, is what they're called. Virginia, for example, has the House of Burgesses, which is a fancy way of saying we've got a government where we can make laws for ourselves. And the colonies have had this for quite a while, since the 1600s, 1700s. They've had their own self-government. But over time, we're seeing that this self-government is being taken away more and more by Great Britain. And the British Parliament and the King are passing laws that the colonists have no say in. And we like to think of this as the M&M concept, right? If I give you one M&M, what do you want? Well, you want a second M&M. Another history teacher, Mr. Hughes out of New York, kind of illustrates this pretty nicely for us, the M&M concept, right? We've got the colonial America, we've got the King of England right here, and the King is basically saying, colonies, yeah, you can have a couple of M&Ms, you can have the House of Burgesses, you can have your Mayflower Compact, but that's all you get. And of course, after a while, the colonists are going, well, wait a second, we want more M&Ms, we want more representation. And we're going to see how this M&M idea, where you've been given a little bit and then you want more, how that's going to eventually lead to our Declaration of Independence. But basically, there are three issues at play here. There are three problems that the colonists are having with Parliament and with the King of England, with Great Britain. The first one is probably the concept that you guys know so well, and that's representation in government. No taxation without representation, right? We have said it over and over again in class, and we're going to say it again. No taxation without representation. Nobody is arguing, or nobody would argue, against taxes, right? Taxes are a necessary part of having government. How many and how much you pay in taxes and what those taxes pay for, people will disagree about that, but nobody will say a government can run without taxes. Taxes are what pay for your schools, they're what pay for your roads, they're what pay for our military, right? We need to have taxes. How much we are taxed, that's up for debate. And so the colonists, remember, they weren't upset about having to pay taxes because their taxes weren't that high. It wasn't that they had to pay taxes. It was that they did not have representation in government. So things like the Tea Act, the Townshend Acts, the Stamp Act, all of these taxes and laws that upset the colonists, it wasn't that they had to pay a tax on tea. Remember, the tea cost less, taxed tea cost less than other tea. It was that they didn't have representation in government. So they had the Boston Tea Party, right? Or the Proclamation of 1763. They were upset because that line was drawn in the sand, basically, without getting their input. So this idea of no taxation without representation is huge. It's absolutely important. It's a huge, huge thing that upset the colonists. They didn't have a voice in Parliament. They didn't have representation. They didn't have anyone there to vote on their taxes. Parliament was passing all of these laws, all of these taxes, and saying, you need to follow up. You need to pay these taxes. You need to pay for this. You need to pay for that. You need to do this. You need to do that. And eventually the colonists got upset. They said, no taxation without representation. So that's our first thing. Representation, 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 representation. They didn't have it. They wanted it. Our second thing that we're going to take a look at is mercantilism, or triangular trade. We've touched on this a little bit. But again, we have another lovely sketch here illustrating triangular trade. You think triangle, think three parts. Well, the first part is going to be Europe. All right, over in Europe, over in England, they're going to go down to Africa and capture human beings, real people, and force them into slavery. They're going to take this human cargo, this human product, slavery, you know, it's an absolutely horrible, horrendous thing that we've talked about. They're going to take these slaves and they're going to ship them over to the colonies where they're going to be put to work. Human labor, free, cheap labor, where they're forced to harvest raw materials. These raw materials, be it sugar or lumber or rum, whatever it is, are going to be then shipped back to England, where England is going to make a profit on them. And then they're going to make a profit, and with that profit, they're going to buy more slaves. With more slaves, they're going to harvest more materials. With more materials, they're going to make more profit. And it goes over and over again. And again, you can see it right here, right? You've got England right here, where they're going down to Africa to capture the slaves. They're taking the slaves across the Middle Passage to the New World, to the colonies, where they are going to be harvesting raw materials, things like cotton and tobacco and those types of things. And then those raw materials are going to be shipped back to England, where they're going to make a profit. and the cycle repeats itself. You can see a nice, lovely triangle. Well, what really upset the colonists about this was that England was making a profit on their raw materials. So first of all, we've got no taxation without representation. Second of all, they're making a profit on their raw materials. And then we've got the third kind of problem, and that is this concept of natural rights. That is the idea that everyone, you, me, your little brothers, your little sisters, your grandparents, every human being in the world has natural rights that they are given from birth. They are born with them. These rights are not given to them by their government. They're not given to them by their parents. They are born with them. Things like the right to life, liberty, right? The right to be free. Things like having a trial were considered natural rights. Having a jury of your peers, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. These rights that the colonists believed that all people were born with. And they said the government's job is to protect these rights. And if the government is not protecting these rights, see ya, get out. We're getting a new government. This concept was first coined by a man named John Locke, not the guy from Lost, but a man named John Locke during the Enlightenment era. He came up with the idea saying, hey, we all have natural rights. The colonists liked this idea. Said, yeah, we have these rights. And the king, you're infringing on our natural rights. You're abusing us, after all, through this triangular trade. You're taking advantage of us. So again, we have no taxation without representation. We have the issue of triangular trade, and then we have the issue of natural rights being taken away. All right, so we've got all of these issues going on, and things are starting to bubble to the surface after Lexington and Concord, and people are saying, maybe we need to break up with England, right? We treat it like a relationship between the colonists and Great Britain. Right? They're in this relationship, this marriage almost, and it's not working out, and they're thinking maybe we need to break up. Enter a man named Thomas Paine, the original T-Paine, long before auto-tune and all of that. Thomas Paine in the First Continental Congress, these guys are getting together, and Thomas Paine, he writes a little pamphlet, just a little packet of paper called Common Sense, or duh, right? When we talk about common sense, we talk about things that are obvious. For example, you should not use your blow dryer to dry your hair while you're sitting in a bathtub. Duh. You should not be playing with fireworks when you're sitting inside your bedroom. Duh, right? You should not stick your car keys in an electrical socket. Duh. These are all common sense things. Well, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense, basically explaining why the colonists needed to break away with England. He said, it's so clear, it's so obvious, it's so duh. Right? Why should this little tiny island nation thousands of miles away rule us? We should be able to rule ourselves. This was a huge success, this pamphlet. Stephanie Meyer, eat your heart out. You wish you could write something that sold as many copies as Thomas Paine's pamphlet. All right, this little pamphlet, keep in mind, this is a time when a lot of people couldn't even read. His pamphlet sold approximately 500,000 copies in the first year. The population of the colonists at the time, 2.4 million. So that's about 1 out of every 5 colonists was buying this pamphlet. By comparison, there are approximately 310 million people in the United States today, and worldwide, Stephanie Meyer and Twilight has only sold maybe 20 million copies, all right? And that's worldwide, when we're talking billions of people. In the United States, maybe 12 or 15 million copies. She is nowhere near the sales figures and sales level of Thomas Paine. So just to give you an idea of how popular this pamphlet was, and people were reading this starting going, this Thomas Paine, he's got an idea. And this was in January of 1776, 7 months prior to the Declaration of Independence. All right, so people are really starting to question it, that whole M&M concept, that whole idea of no taxation without representation, triangular trade, abusing the colonies, and natural rights being taken away. And then we finally get to the point where Thomas Jefferson, the Continental Congress, they say, we've had enough. It is time to break up with the king. This relationship is toxic. We can't stick with it anymore. We need to break up with them. And there are kind of 3 key ideas to the Declaration of Independence, the world's most famous breakup letter. The first is consent of the governed. And what that means is that government, the king and parliament, they get their authority, they get their power from the people. Think of it as the chicken and the egg, right? When you talk about what came first, the chicken and the egg, for our purposes, we're going to say that the chicken comes first, and the egg that the chicken has is the government, all right? So you've got the egg, which is the government. You've got the chicken, cluck, cluck, cluck. That's you and I, right? We are the chicken. We are the people are the chicken is the people. All right, so the chicken lays the egg. If the chicken does not like the egg, if the egg is rotten, if it smells funky, if it tastes bad, if it's a bad egg, you smash that egg, get rid of it, and you create a new egg, right? Because if the egg is bad, if the government is bad, the people give the government its power. So since the egg comes from the people, comes from the chicken. You don't like that egg, you smash that egg, you start a new egg. So that's the first idea. This is a revolutionary idea. Thomas Jefferson is going, the only reason that government has its power is because we give it to them. The king and government, they don't get their power from God or from some higher divine power or anything like that. They get their power from the people. So that's the first thing. The second thing that he says is that governments, again, created by the people, of the people, for the people, excuse me, that governments, their job is to protect the natural rights of people. So we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or the ability to own property is what they meant. So Thomas Jefferson saying, we all have these rights. Of course, at the time, he was referring mostly to, white upper-class men, but he's saying we all have these rights, and we get these rights from our Creator, from God, not from the king. All right? The king, you get your power from us. Your job, we give you the power to protect our rights. And then lastly, in the Declaration of Independence, and a majority of it, the majority of the text is listing off all of these grievances, or all of these problems that the colonists had with the king. No taxation without representation. The Stamp Act, the Tea Act, all of these things that the king has done, all of these things where the colonists have tried to say, look, we've tried to make this work. We've tried to work it out with you. All we want is representation. You are continuing to ignore us. You are continuing to violate our natural rights. You are continuing to hurt us. So therefore, kicking you to the curb. See ya. We're dropping you like a bad habit. We are over. We are dumping you. They write the Declaration of Independence. They sign off on it. The world's most famous breakup letter is sent to the King of England. And what comes after that? Oh, war, right? The American Revolution. The war will begin after this in full force, and that's what we'll look at kind of in our next unit, in our next video lecture. But again, we want to talk about those three main reasons why. Well, there's no taxation without representation. The colonists feel that they're being abused. Their natural rights are taken away. They write the Declaration of Independence, and they break up with the king. So there we have it, the tragic relationship of the colonists and the king, and all the drama surrounding that. Hope that helps to clarify things. Talk to you later. See ya.